fifth episode of Walking with Beasts, Sabre Tooth, is set during the Quaternary period in the early Pleistocene epoch, 1 million years ago, and is set in Paraguay, and was filmed in Brazil, a location which has barely changed since the inhabitants of this episode became extinct. It's a beautiful place, still filled with weird animals including anteaters, armadillos, and maned wolves. After the titles, we are shown a grassy plain, peppered with palm trees and rocks, which look to be like termite mounds. Some truly unique and interesting music plays here, which is a staple for this episode. Lots of guitar and piano within this episode. A small cat is not having the best day, as it's being chased by a large predatory bird.
The aptly named terror birds.
I'm so glad they decided to include another giant bird species like Gastornis from New Dawn, as I've always been fascinated by this. The only shame is that Walking with Beasts has never tackled prehistoric New Zealand or Madagascar, with the moa and elephant bird respectfully. However, the documentary Monsters We Met, which is almost impossible to find a good copy of anywhere, did cover Australia and New Zealand, albeit with a far lower budget. There's a really nice bit of slow motion here as we pan across to see the cat being chased by the bird's gigantic legs behind. A nice bit of size comparison. The cat looks as if it's done for, as the giant bird knocks it down ready for the kill, with the narration ominously stating that recently the balance of top predators in this part of the world has changed. Suddenly, a huge adult male saber tooth appears to defend its offspring and scare the attacker away.
It's a saber-toothed cat. Our first one.
The titular saber-toothed cat Smilodon, meaning knife tooth, lived from 2.5 million years ago to 10,000 years ago, so is within the correct time frame of this episode's setting. This is also another example of a named individual being the focus of the episode, like the Australopithecus troop last episode. Here we have Halftooth, the alpha male of the pride. One of the first things that is established quickly is that
there is no such thing as a saber-toothed tiger.
Which is important to know, seeing how Smilodon was not closely related to modern tigers, despite a lot of depictions referring to them as tigers. It was a member of the subfamily Machaerodontidae, which included Dinophilis from the last episode. Within the Smilodon genus there were 3 separate species, Smilodon gracilis, Smilodon fatalis, and Smilodon populator. Smilodon populator was the largest of the 3, and the one that would have so easily made South America its home during the Great American Biotic Interchange, with many animals coming down to the lower continent or vice versa. Its design is honestly beautiful with the mottled fur pattern, which reminds me of jaguar spots, only more faded to help it blend in with the sandy and grassy environment. Works really well, and easily my favourite Smilodon design of the 3 we got from Impossible Pictures. There is clear sexual dimorphism between the males and females, with the males having a sort of mane, like modern lions, and the females lacking this. The babies, however, look very odd. Great that they gave them their own model, but it is extremely weird. Thankfully, when it came time to redo the Smilodon in Prehistoric Park in 2006, the babies look a lot better. Speaking of Prehistoric Park, the design in that is also very nice, and suits the show extremely well. My only problem with it is that the fur looks a bit too flat and pale. Equally, the Smilodon in Primeval is too bulky for my liking, with a far too emotive face, though its fur patterning is gorgeous. Pride behaviour is unknown in this species, as it's only really seen in lions today, so it's not very common. This kinda makes the episode a bit inaccurate, since the whole story revolves around Halftooth's struggle with the pride. There is a sequence, however, where it's just Halftooth on his own, hunting like a lone predator, so that does make up for it somewhat. This is also present in Prehistoric Park after a scene with the pride, the next time we see Smilodon they're hunting alone. Like other modern cats today, Smilodon are shown to be highly territorial and use scent marking as a way to warn rivals of their presence. As with most species in the show, we get a form of animatronic, which is the head puppet used for the close-ups, and it matches the CGI model really well. This also brings up the debate of the lip Smilodon, which is so cursed, but also something that wasn't put forward until after the show ended. The cave lions in the next episode also reuse the Smilodon model, just with a different fur pattern. Halftooth successfully scares away the terror birds that have been chasing his young and roars triumphantly at the camera, showing off his fantastic design and on-screen presence as the titles appear.
Now that is cool.
This brings us to the terror birds themselves, identified as Forus rarcus, and there's quite a lot to say about these things. They lived from 20 to 13 million years ago, which means that they're way out of time, and shouldn't even be in the Pliocene, let alone the Pleistocene. Coming from the Miocene, these animals should have been long dead before this episode was set, but then maybe they wandered through an anomaly. They were also shorter than what is depicted, being 2 meters tall and not 3 meters, and should have a comparatively shorter neck. They also strangely possess a wing claw like modern-day Hoatzins, which Forus rarcus never had. The colours are really striking though, with the white with most of the body, and the dark brown wings and head feathers, which complements it really well. Looks a bit like an ostrich actually. The red beak is also a nice inclusion. With their design, even if it is iconic, the prehistoric park Forest Racus definitely gets my vote as being my favourite over the two. I love its appearance and only wish it appeared more. The episode's narration also mentions the Forest Racus has cousins living in Texas and Florida. The species this is referring to is likely Titanis, which lived in North America, and were also possibly extinct by the time this episode is set. The group in which this animal belongs, the Forest Racids' closest living relatives is the Seriema, which still lives in South America to this day, and also resembles a terror bird rather closely. After a nice establishing shot of Pleistocene Paraguay, with some great guitar music, we are back to the Smilodons, and are introduced to the Pride, which consists of many females and their young. The sounds they make are fantastic, and fittingly deep and guttural. The fur patterning up close also still holds up to this day. Unfortunately for the main individual character of this episode, Half-Tooth, his way of life is being threatened by a pair of rival males which want control of his territory. The way they stand staring at him is so menacing.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
The slicing knife sound effects are brought back into the music as the narration ominously states,
They want Half-Tooth's crown.
As soon as we're introduced to these cats, we're whisked away to have an overview of prehistoric South America, which includes some really nice and unique music to fit the continent and its inhabitants. One of the best pieces of unreleased music in my opinion. This shot was likely filmed from a helicopter, and it's funny that the animators made the Macrauchenia react and run away like this, just how wildebeest and zebra would do in Africa in modern times. With this sequence, we're given a brief introduction to all but one of the species in this episode, Didicurus, Macrauchenia, and Forest Racus, the last being revealed later. South America being isolated for so long has allowed all these strange and unique species to evolve, much like Madagascar. This all changed when North America connected with the continent, and started the Great American Biotic Interchange, where species from both continents moved between to diversify and occasionally outcompete other animals. There's some really nice shots of various CGI species here which match the backgrounds so flawlessly, possibly because they were there before and the landscape has barely changed. The Forest Racus gets a nice close-up and they look amazing, even if I still prefer this one. Jumping back to the cats again, it's cool that some of the females have shorter sabres than the others. Nice attention to detail.
Nasty big pointy teeth.
Unfortunately, this also has the reverse with Half-Tooth, whose Half-Tooth switches sides constantly throughout the episode, likely due to shots being mirrored or reused, as opposed to a continuity error. It's interesting that the narration says that no cat has ever set foot in South America before, which of course is true, but weird to think about, especially nowadays, when you couldn't imagine the Amazon without jaguars or ocelots. We get some backstory as to how Half-Tooth became Half-Tooth. So I guess he was just called Longtooth before his accident? He lazes around enjoying the company of his pride before the two rival males appear once more, lumbering towards him in a bold and deliberate way. More undertones of music start as Half-Tooth makes his way towards the threat. The shoulder movement on the cats is absolutely spot on. If you've ever seen a lion or tiger move, they have that exact motion. Easy enough to draw comparisons, and helpful for animating this extinct species. Another thing about the Smilodon in this episode is the roaring sounds that seem to come from a bear, but I could be wrong. I'm just used to hearing it from the cave bear in Prehistoric Park. The females meanwhile take the cubs away from the conflict. The fight begins and it's pretty quick and brutal, demonstrating how dangerous these brothers are. Their tactic is cleverly conveyed as one goes behind Half-Tooth to surround him. Half-Tooth also rears up and fights with one to try and regain control, but unfortunately this doesn't last. He retreats towards the stormy clouds, illustrating his predicament. You could show me this shot and I'd instantly believe that it was a real animal and not one created on a computer. It looks perfect. The narration also says that life for a lone male is difficult, yet this can and is achieved by many wildcats, such as tigers, and even lions are capable of it somewhat. Half-Tooth stops by a pond to quench his thirst, and that reflection is so brilliant. There's very few negative things I can say about the Smilodon design. Half-Tooth moves into the scrubland away from the plains, an interesting environment that harbours giant creatures yet to be revealed. The music here is quite interesting and gives off curious tones, as if Half-Tooth is discovering this location as we the audience are too. Emerging into a clearing, Half-Tooth comes across a group of Didicurus. This is one of the coolest things in the episode, and yet it barely gets any screen time. Didicurus lived from 2 million years ago to possibly as late as 7,000 years ago. making it one of the last surviving glyptodonts, the group in which this animal belonged. Glyptodonts were giant relatives of armadillos, some of which could grow huge like Didicurus, which had a body length of 3.6 meters and a 1 meter tail. Its design is basically flawless in terms of accuracy. My only slight problem with it is its head being so weirdly yellow, but it doesn't affect the body shape. They were likely grazers rather than insectivores like their modern descendants, due to their teeth shape as well as where they lived in grasslands. They are seen in the episode engaging in intraspecific conflict, using their tails as is evidence within their fossils, with marks that could have been left by some of their own species fighting over territory or mating rights. These tails likely supported a row of spikes on them, similar to the thagomizers of stegosaurs. They were also probably sometimes used as a defense against would-be predators, which would harken back to ankylosaurid dinosaurs. As mentioned earlier, these animals were related to the armadillo, which itself
Looks really prehistoric anyway.
The recent documentary show Life on Our Planet showcased these animals alongside a sabre tooth, and is probably one of the highlights of the series for me. Didicurus likely became extinct due to human overhunting and climate change, as with most Ice Age megafauna. The brothers approach the females, who appear very hostile towards them, seeing how they still have Half-Tooth's cubs to protect. There's a lot of tension, and the females won't accept the brothers whilst Half-Tooth's cubs are still alive. This could get nasty. Meanwhile, Half-Tooth himself is patrolling the scrub forest in search of food, with more light percussion. Instead of finding any food, he comes across... well, I'll let Kenneth explain it. This reveal is so great.
The dense undergrowth harbours another colossus, a sloth. But this is no ordinary sloth. This is Megatherium, a giant ground sloth.
This is an incredible reveal. Hey, that animatronic arm looks familiar. I wonder where it is now. Oh, here it is. I am lucky enough to have this prop safely in my collection, living amongst other walking with paraphernalia, as well as prehistoric park and primeval items, naturally. One of my prized possessions, and what you see at the start of the video is my desperate attempt to try and recreate the shots from this episode in my garden. You'd be surprised at how much that thing weighs, and of course, the animatronic side of things has long since been made redundant. A lot of the foam that makes up the palm side is also cracked, unfortunately, but it was a product of its time, and obviously not built to last, although it's fascinating to see within the fingers and see the metal joints that hold it together. Crawly Creatures did a great job with this, and all of its counterparts. Walking with collectors enthusiasts meet up when? It's really cool that it's built life-size as well, as this was probably done to scale with the foliage. I'm not entirely sure whether it was filmed in South America like the Smilodon head puppet, as the close-ups could have easily been filmed somewhere in the UK. There's no conclusive proof either way, unless someone has any behind-the-scenes production photos of it in use. Back to the actual animal now. Megatherium lived from 5 million years ago to 12,000 years ago, meaning that it only just missed out on surviving into the modern day, like the rest of the species in this episode, except the time-travelling Forest Racas. This has got to be one of the most impressive and amazing of all prehistoric creatures, in my opinion. I love weird animals anyway, so this is a fantastic addition. A shame that it only appears sparingly in this episode, and isn't even introduced with the other species at the start. It's certainly something you wouldn't want to get on its bad side. I'd be with Half-Tooth and wisely give it a wide berth. If you've ever seen a skeleton of one, you can really appreciate the size of the thing, something truly remarkable to behold. The specimen at the Natural History Museum in London, in particular, captures how gigantic it was. Over the course of prehistory, there were many different species of ground sloth. Megatherium in this episode being the biggest known, around the size of a modern elephant, but some were far smaller and even lived in North America. Hard to comprehend that sloths, armadillos, and anteaters all belong to the same family, when they all look so strikingly different. Like glyptodonts, ground sloths had an osteoderm-like bone structure underneath their skin, which made them effectively armor-plated, an impressive defense. Some recent suggestions suggest that Megatherium had no fur, since it was so large and lived in a tropical environment, instead having thick skin like a hippo, rhino, or elephant. Otherwise the design is perfect, and probably my favourite thing in this episode, even before I acquired its arm. The carnivorous behaviour it displays is quite interesting to talk about too. It's seen going after carrion to supplement its diet, which makes it even scarier. Some herbivorous species today also do this, and it's still odd to see or hear stories about, but it's perfectly natural. Even the music that accompanies it when it appears is so unsettling, with the tapping drums and I think flutes? I ended up using it for my intro as well, though I didn't notice that it occasionally makes bear and moose sounds, which is forgivable somewhat since they're muffled. Megatherium became extinct from being killed by early people, and likely climate change as well. If you're a fan of Primeval, my friend John wrote a fanfic that includes this species, which I'll link below. Overall, this animal is great, but could you imagine if Sid from Ice Age was more like this?
Why? Doesn't anyone love me?
Half-Tooth is forced to move on in search of smaller prey. After a few weeks, the brothers are becoming more bold, and have succeeded in killing all but 2 of Half-Tooth's cubs. The mother hides the remaining cubs whilst she and the other females go hunting. The mother reluctantly and warily leaves her offspring as they lie low in the grass.
And man, are they ugly!
What is up with their faces? Anyway, some dark and quite sinister music plays with strings and processional drums to drive the motion. It's not the most amazing track, but it does its job and weirdly got a release on the official album, unlike some more deserving pieces in my opinion.
The brothers are spotted dangerously close to the hiding place.
It's interesting to think who spotted them, since Half-Tooth and the females are absent. The cubs' lives hang by a thread, quite literally, and perfectly stated by the narration. The music ends on a few long notes, holding the tension as the camera zooms into one of the cubs, who foolishly lifts its head to view the brothers walk past.
Stay still!
On second thought, let them be spotted. This seems to be the end of these 2 little kitty cats. Out on the plains are a group of Macrauchenia.
Outstanding in a field.
This species lived from the late Pliocene to the late Pleistocene, 1.8 million years ago to 12,000 years ago, and belonged to a distinct order of South American ungulate mammals, called Litoptena, that are now all extinct. Macrauchenia was possibly the last example of a species from this order. The model in the show is fairly accurate for today's standards, and there's not a lot wrong with it. One possible critique is that it's possible the Macrauchenia didn't have a trunk, but instead had a larger nose more akin to the Sega antelope. Goofy as hell. It may also have had a slightly bulkier body than what's seen. It's also not confirmed whether they lived in herds or not. The males are said to be solitary in this episode. The Macrauchenia's closest living relatives are the odd-toed ungulates, the rhinoceros, tapirs, and horses. Like tapirs and some species of rhino, they use their trunks to browse. The design is simple but very nice, with the pale orange and tan coloration, and with the reddish markings on the head, which definitely makes it stand out. Like other designs from Walking With, it's become iconic and synonymous with the species. The video game Wildlife Park 2 included this species, which looks identical to that from the show, as well as others including Gastornis and Entelodon. Macrauchenia became extinct mainly due to climate shifts within South America, and not just because of hunting from early human settlers or new predators from North America. The extinct ungulates mill around their grassy plain, oblivious to the hunters gathering around them. Possibly the most iconic music track from this episode plays here, Sabre Hunters, which is a combination of all the music we've heard before in this episode. Guitars, strings, percussion, and the knife slicing sounds to reflect the Knife-Tooth name. All very dramatic and helps build some excellent tension. The Smilodons stalk the grass ready for their moment to attack. This whole scene has an amazing build-up and payoff. Hard to believe that it's all made within the computer. It looks just like a modern lion hunt in Africa. There's some more shots of the practical Smilodon head again, as more narration exposits that they are not built for long distance running, like say a wolf species. Explosive ambush attacks are their forte, so they need to get close.
One false move, and they will have to start all over again.
Chillingly good narration. My compliments to the script. The music keeps building and building until it's released, as the lead female Smilodon gives chase to the Macrauchenia. The way they run is pretty comical. A lot of this chase is filmed in slow motion to give off even more drama, and to show off just how good the CGI in this show is. The lead female drives the herd into the other Smilodon who are lying in wait. I particularly like this shot from ground level as the Macrauchenia rocket past, with the dirt being kicked up, which is a nice touch. And the next shot of the Smilodon catching up in slow motion. It's very memorable. Is it weird to get so hyped about watching this scene, even when you've seen it countless times before? No. What are you talking about? The chosen victim of this hunt manages to successfully outmaneuver one of the pursuing Smilodon by jolting to the side.
But that's why Smilodon hunt in groups. A second cat brings her down.
It's quite sad to watch this unfold, even if they're purely animated creatures. The struggles it gives off really show how distressing this is, as the Smilodon hold their grip on the prey. The rest of the herd scatter, leaving this individual behind, with the music fading out. Together, the Smilodon pin down the hapless Macrauchenia with the weight of their bodies, not using their saber teeth until it's under their control. They only use them to finish it off, which is a bit morbid. The Macrauchenia also becomes a practical effect as it dies. Having such large teeth, Smilodon are unable to eat everything on a kill, as the teeth restrict their movement, which leaves a lot of food left for other carnivores.
Come on, Mr. Terrorbird. Here's dinner.
I do love how the Terrorbirds all group together in a little trio. After the Smilodon eat their fill, the Forest Racos move in to finish the carcass off. A nice interaction is the practical Forest Racos head eating from the practical Macrauchenia. Also, the fact that there's flies on the dead Macrauchenia suggests that there's actual meat on it to complete the look, or at least a pheromone to attract them. Interestingly, there's a promo shot of a pair of Forest Racos tussling with what looks to be a Propaleotherium model for some reason. I'm not sure what species this is meant to be, and it's clearly just a reused prop anyway. As the mother Smilodon returns to her cub's hiding place, she calls out to them, but there's no reply. More unsettling music with a solo flute and strings. The storm clouds roll in and it begins torrential rain. More mood reflection for Half-Tooth, who is still skirting around his old territory. After finding the brothers' scent sprayed over a patch of trees, Half-Tooth discovers his remaining cubs. Oh, wow, that's quite gruesome. It's hard to see in this shot, but in the next shot it's clear. One of the cubs has been decapitated by the brothers, and there's no sign of the other. Pretty dramatic if you ask me.
Where's the baby? There he is!
It seems you can't go through an Impossible Pictures episode featuring a Smilodon without one dying, or at least being injured. It's also interesting that the practical cub head actually looks better than the CGI version. With nothing left for him, Half-Tooth retreats back into the scrubland, away from his old territory. Early in the morning, Half-Tooth is hunting again. The lighting here is really nice, with a hazy blue filter making it feel calm and peaceful. Of course, this is broken by the imminent hunt. Half-Tooth lies in wait to try and catch a male Macrauchenia. The same music from when he first entered the scrub forest plays again, and like that time, the music quickly dissolves into the ground sloth theme, as one of the giants appears nearby, quote-unquote, ruining everything.
How rude!
The sloth inadvertently puts the Macrauchenia off browsing, and it starts to move away.
It's now or never.
It's now or never.
Half-Tooth chases the Macrauchenia in a desperate attempt as the music picks up the tempo with some nice slow motion again. Half-Tooth unfortunately fails as he is too weak to keep going, as the prey gets away, all thanks to the ground sloth.
Ah, Sid! Now we gotta find more food.
Later on in the day, after a nice time-lapse of the light coming through, Half-Tooth is still patrolling the same area, hoping for something. He finds a mother and calf Macrauchenia who are browsing. Something makes the mother go on the alert as she bolts off, leaving her youngster behind, failing to catch up as a Forest Racos appears from nowhere to kill it. That was dramatic. The music gets very animated here, with sliding strings, akin to a horror film as this happens. The Terrorbird's success in landing a meal is short-lived, however, as Half-Tooth quickly seizes his chance to steal the kill. Poor birdie. That little drum beat is a fun little thing. It's also used in episode 1 of series 3 of Primeval occasionally. Half-Tooth is then said to disappear from the scrub forest, rather ominously, as we move back to the other Smilodon. Thanks to the brothers killing Half-Tooth's cubs, the females are now coming into heat again, and we get a bit of cat-on-cat action.
Keep smiling!
It's interesting to see as how Half-Tooth is struggling, the rest of the Smilodon are doing well. A couple of younger females play around with a frustrated Didicurus. This scene is very similar to the Life on Our Planet scene. After a few weeks, the group are still going strong, and have seemingly caught and killed another Macrauchenia, which they're feeding on.
Oh, yummo!
The kill has drawn the attention of a Megatherium, which arrives uninvited looking for some protein. One of the brothers squares up to it, rather foolishly.
This is not going to go the way you think.
With the music building, the sloth rearing up on its hind legs and arms positioned accordingly, we all hold our breaths as the scene unfolds. You really wouldn't mess with one of these things. I love the lines, "nothing gets in their way," and you can completely believe this statement as the sloth slams the Smilodon out of the way, likely catching it on its big, meaty claws, killing it instantly.
Fatality.
What a power move. The other Smilodon quickly abandon the kill to the giant, who takes all the food for himself.
That's a good eating.
I love how directly the sloth affects the story here. It's fantastic, but sadly with that scene over, the ground sloth is out of the episode.
No!
One down, one to go. The sloth did half the work for Half-Tooth. Now there's only one brother left.
Excellent.
Half-Tooth then reappears very soon after, seemingly aware that something has changed. He quickly sprays his own scent, marking over that of the remaining brother, showing his dominance. Back with the clan, the females are less calm with the surviving brother, who isn't having the best of time, no doubt coming to grips with the reality of being on his own. An attack is inevitable, and the brother knows it.
Half-Tooth is back.
That shot of him by the waterfall is beautiful. The track Blade Brothers starts to play, the ultimate battle for the control of the territory. Lots of music used previously when Half-Tooth first encountered the brothers is used again here. The brother is seen drinking from a stream as Half-Tooth approaches silently before making himself known with a roar. The two cats size each other up, ready to do battle. The actual battle itself is relatively short but violent, with Half-Tooth being in control most of the time. He rears up again to fight the male, and he quickly defeats the brother, who runs off after he is permitted to by Half-Tooth. Great choreography and framing with all of this. Half-Tooth is relentless, but it pays off as he is now back where he belongs. He gives a triumphant roar of victory. The brother, meanwhile, staggers away and collapses, succumbing to the wounds inflicted by Half-Tooth. After showing a close-up of a practical effect, as is the way with creatures in these shows dying only to become rubber, the shot pans out to show a terror bird already picking off the carcass. Circle of life and all that.
The short, violent reign of the brothers is over.
And not short enough it was.
Hey, is that the plateau from the Lost World?
The plateau!
The next shot opens with an adult Dedicurus with some very cute babies in tow, and the music from when the episode's setting was introduced plays again. Half-Tooth sits back in his old territory with new cubs, surrounded by females. King of Pride Rock, King of the Grasslands again. The episode ends with the narration pointing out just how successful Smilodon as a species was, only dying out within the last 10,000 years due to the climate changing around them too much, and the onset of the oncoming Ice Age. Without the larger herbivores they hunted, they would not survive. Now South American grasslands are a shadow of their former selves, yet still filled with amazing wildlife. This episode is probably tied with being my second favourite episode alongside Mammoth Journey after New Dawn. It delivers a very strong story as well as showcasing some really cool animals. I kind of wish there was more of it, but what we got was great anyway, and it's nice that Prehistoric Park revisited this time in their own Sabre Tooth episode. Thank you very much for listening, and look out for my review of episode 6, Mammoth Journey, soon.